When you picture, like, a guide for self-help and spiritual growth,
Hmm.
there is a very specific aesthetic that probably comes to mind for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like soft lighting, maybe some pastel colors.
Yeah, and you playing in the background.
Exactly. A soothing voice telling you to take a deep breath, let go of your stress, visualize a peaceful meadow. I mean, the entire wellness industry is pretty much built around making you feel completely safe and comfortable.
It is. It's entirely designed to reduce friction. Modern wellness encourages you to ease into reflection without ever really, disturbing your comfort zone.
Which is why you definitely do not picture a towering skeletal figure grinning with these bared teeth, covered in owl feathers, and wearing heavy jewelry made entirely out of human bones.
No, that is definitely not the standard wellness vibe.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But that bizarre juxtaposition is our exact mission for today. We're doing a deep dive into a truly mind-bending esoteric text. Specifically, we're looking at Chapter 8 of the 12 Gods of Aztec Mythology and Freemasonry.
Which is such a fascinating source.
It totally is, and we're trying to figure out why this terrifying-looking Aztec Lord of the Dead, Mictlantecuhtli, is deeply connected to the secret subterranean rituals of Freemasonry.
Right.
Like, we're going to explore how a skeletal god of the underworld is framed not as a monster coming to get you, but as a profound and, well, completely necessary guide for personal transformation.
And honestly, it requires a massive paradigm shift just to approach the material.
Oh, for sure.
Because to really grasp what this text is arguing, we have to establish who Mictlantecuhtli is and, more importantly, the psychological landscape where he operates.
Okay, so let's set the stage.
Right. So he, along with his consort Mictlantecuhtli, are the rulers of Mictlan, which is the Aztec underworld.
The land of the dead.
Exactly. But we have to immediately discard our modern Western view of death to understand this place. In the West, death is almost universally viewed as this fearful finality.
A hard stop to the story.
Precisely. The ultimate tragic end of the road. The Aztecs, however, saw death as an active initiation.
Wait, an initiation?
Yeah, it was a descent into a great mystery. And fundamentally, the text argues it was a path to cosmic integration. Death wasn't the final negation of life. It was just a highly demanding stage in an eternal cycle of regeneration.
Okay, that is a huge shift in perspective.
It is.
Yeah.
And Mictlantecuhtli stands at the threshold of that brutal process. He is not like the Grim Reaper maliciously coming to steal your life.
Right, he's not the bad guy.
No, he's the final unyielding gatekeeper of the soul. He's overseeing your dissolution so you can actually be transformed into something new.
So to understand how Freemasonry eventually adopted like a psychological version of this process, the text says we first need to understand the physical journey the Aztecs believed the soul actually took.
Right, the descent.
Yeah, and calling it a descent almost feels like an understatement. What does this journey actually look like?
Well, according to Aztec cosmology, Mictlan was not just a single dark cavern you poofed into the moment your heart stopped.
Like a waiting room.
No, not at all. It was a massive, multi-layered underworld consisting of 9 grueling levels that the soul had to physically traverse.
9 levels, that sounds intense.
Oh, the text details some truly harrowing trials. We're talking about having to cross a path between 2 massive mountains that constantly crash together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then you have to walk through these freezing, icy winds that are described as cutting the soul like obsidian blades.
That is terrifying.
And eventually you have to navigate past jaguars whose specific cosmic job is to devour your heart.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there. And this process takes 4 years.
4 years, yes.
If the ultimate goal is just to realize you're dead and need to let go of your mortal life, why does it take 4 agonizing years of wandering through obsidian winds?
That's a great question.
I mean, why not just a sudden, blinding moment of spiritual clarity?
Because the human ego is incredibly stubborn. Think about how tightly you cling to your identity, your possessions, your grudges, your status. The text argues that you cannot just instantly drop a lifetime of conditioning.
So it's a process of wearing you down.
Exactly. The purpose of this prolonged 4-year ordeal is to forcibly and gradually wear away the ego and all attachments of the flesh. It takes that long to meticulously strip you down, preparing the soul for final repose.
Wow.
Now, the text does note there were exceptions to this grueling path.
Right, the fast tracks to the afterlife.
Exactly. If you died from causes associated with water, or if you died in battle and childbirth, or as a sacrifice, you bypassed Mictlan entirely.
Oh, really? Where did you go instead?
The belief was that those specific deaths already demanded the ultimate sacrifice of the self. So you are granted alternative celestial destinations like Tlalocan or the House of the Sun.
Okay, so a totally different route.
Right. But for the vast majority of everyday people, this grueling 4-year descent was the normative, expected posthumous path.
I have to challenge the text's characterization of this, though.
Oh, how so?
Well, it describes Mictlantecuhtli as indifferent, not cruel.
Right.
But having your heart actively eaten by a jaguar sounds like the literal definition of cruel. Clashing mountains trying to crush you.
I see where you're coming from.
Is the text arguing this is just the cosmic equivalent of, like, really aggressive airport security?
Okay, I like that.
Like the TSA agent making you throw away your water bottle and take off your shoes? It feels incredibly intrusive and painful, but it's a completely necessary protocol to strip off your earthly baggage before you're allowed to board your flight.
That analogy actually captures the underlying mechanism perfectly.
Does it?
Yes. Because the agent making you empty your pockets isn't doing it to torture you personally.
Right. It's just their job.
Exactly. They are strictly enforcing a boundary for the safety of the journey. Mictlantecuhtli operates on that exact same principle.
So it's not personal.
Not at all. He is the physical embodiment of the inevitability of dissolution. The jaguar eating the heart isn't an act of malice. In Aztec thought, the heart is the seat of earthly passion and ego.
Oh, so they're eating the ego.
Exactly. The jaguar is removing the very thing that keeps you tethered to your past life. And the clashing mountains, they're crushing the physical attachments you're desperately trying to hold on to.
So Mictlantecuhtli just enforces this physics of the soul.
Beautifully put. He prepared you for rest by forcibly removing everything that cannot endure eternity.
So it's like gravity. Gravity isn't cruel when you trip and fall. It's just an indifferent force.
All right.
Mictlantecuhtli is just the gravity of the underworld's pulling away what doesn't belong.
That is the exact philosophical foundation we need here. And understanding that gravity naturally brings us to how Western mystery schools, specifically Freemasonry, intentionally simulate this exact experience for the living.
Because if ego death is required for true spiritual integration, you ideally don't want to wait until you're physically dead to achieve it.
Exactly. You want to do the work while you still have time to benefit from it.
But obviously, a Masonic lodge cannot simulate a 4-year hike through clashing mountains and obsidian winds.
Right. Logistically impossible.
So how do they replicate that indifferent stripping away of the ego?
They utilize a deeply symbolic space known as the Chamber of Reflection.
Okay.
This is a practice used heavily in Continental Masonic rites, as well as some York Rite chapters.
Just to make sure we are all on the same page, what is the distinction there? Like, what does Continental or York Rite mean in this context?
Oh, sure. So Freemasonry isn't just one monolithic organization with identical rules everywhere. Think of them as different historical branches or traditions within the broader fraternity.
Got it, like different flavors.
Right. Continental rites developed largely in Europe and tend to lean heavily into esoteric and philosophical alchemy,
Okay.
whereas the York Rite is a specific pathway of degrees a member can take after their initial lodge experience. But both of these specific traditions heavily utilize the Chamber of Reflection.
And what actually happens in there?
Before a candidate is even allowed to be initiated, they are locked inside a very small, windowless, dimly lit room.
Sounds claustrophobic.
It is meant to be isolating. And the items placed in this room with them are highly specific. The candidate sits at a small table containing a skull, a scythe, a small dish of salt, a piece of bread, and a mirror.
Wow. The ultimate memento mori. A blatant reminder that you are going to die.
Precisely.
But what is the psychological mechanism here? I understand wanting a candidate to experience self-reflection,
Sure.
but giving someone salt and bread and locking them in a dark closet with a skull and a scythe? It sounds more like a haunted house at a theme park than a legitimate path to enlightenment.
I can see how it sounds that way.
How does the text connect that kind of horror movie setup with actual lasting transformation?
It comes down to the mechanics of sensory deprivation
Mhm.
and confronting your baseline existence.
Okay.
The text explicitly argues that these items are not meant to terrify the candidate. They're meant to prompt absolute stillness.
Stillness.
Yes. The salt and the bread are there to physically remind you of the absolute bare minimum required for human survival.
Just the basic.
Right, it strips away the illusion of your wealth, your status, your favorite restaurants, reminding you that your skeleton self requires almost nothing.
And the scythe?
The scythe is the great equalizer, reminding you that time will eventually cut down the king and the peasant alike.
And then you're forced to look in that mirror right next to that human skull.
And that is the crux of the simulation. We live our lives constantly distracted by the external world, building up our egos based on how others perceive us.
Oh, absolutely.
The chamber of reflection strips all external validation away. You're left with nothing to look at but your own mortality.
So Mictlantecuhtli is in that room.
Metaphorically, yes.
Yeah.
In this context, he acts as the perfect archetype. He is the guardian of the crypt. He is the silent initiator.
He doesn't test the candidate with riddles or verbal questions?
Exactly. He tests them with shadows, isolation, and stillness. You have to face the bare, unadorned truth of who you are, without your titles, before you can even begin the great work of building a better self.
This brings up a fascinating pivot in the text.
Yeah, the bones.
Right. You've sat in the chamber of reflection, you've looked in the mirror, and you've been stripped down to your absolute skeleton self.
Right.
But what happens to those leftover bones? Because the text makes it clear that the bones don't just sit there in a dusty pile serving as a depressing reminder of your mortality.
No, they don't.
They actually become the raw material for creation.
This is where the synthesis of the two traditions really shines. It leans heavily on one of the most important Aztec creation myths involving Mictlantecuhtli.
I love this myth.
It's great, right? The myth centers on the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, who realizes that in order to create the current generation of humanity, he needs raw materials.
He needs the bones.
Exactly. He has to descend into Mictlan to retrieve the bones of the previous ages of humanity. But Mictlantecuhtli, being the ultimate gatekeeper, refuses to just hand them over.
Naturally.
Right. He demands his due process and forces Quetzalcoatl to endure specific trials to earn them.
But Quetzalcoatl tries to cheat the system, doesn't he?
He does. He grabs the bones and makes a run for it.
And as he's fleeing through the dark caverns of the underworld, he stumbles. He physically trips. The bones fall from his grasp, and they shatter into thousands of pieces on the floor of Mictlan.
Which is a huge moment in the myth.
Reading that, it sounds like a catastrophic failure, like he broke the very thing he needed to build humanity.
It definitely appears disastrous at first glance, but the text highlights that this shattering is actually essential.
Really?
Yes. Quetzalcoatl sweeps up all those shattered, broken fragments anyway. He brings them back to the realm of the living, mixes them with the blood of the gods, and that exact mixture is what is used to mold and create us, the new human race.
It makes me think of humanity as like a cosmic Lego set.
A Lego set. Okay, go on.
Like Quetzalcoatl drops the box, the pieces shatter everywhere, completely destroying whatever previous structure they were in.
Right.
But he just sweeps them up, mixes them with a new binding agent, and builds us anyway. You literally have to smash the old structure to have the individual pieces required to build the new one.
That Lego analogy is incredibly apt. It highlights that brokenness is not a failure of the process.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. Brokenness is the exact precondition required for regeneration. If the bones had remained whole and intact, they would have just remained artifacts of a dead past.
They would just be old skeletons.
Right. By shattering, they become modular. Bones, in this esoteric context, are not endings, they are seeds.
Bones as seeds, that completely flips the script on how we view failure or, hitting rock bottom.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the text connects this directly to the central Masonic legend of Hiram Abiff.
Who is Hiram Abiff?
In Masonic allegory, Hiram is the master builder and chief architect of King Solomon's temple. According to the legend used in their rituals, he is slain by ruffians who demand the secret words of a master mason.
Oh, wow.
And his body is buried in a shallow grave in the rubbish of the temple.
So his death and burial isn't just like a tragic true crime story about a murder at a construction site?
No, not at all. Esoterically, Hiram's brokenness and his burial in the dark earth is a necessary mechanism.
Like the shattered bone.
Exactly like the shattered bones in Mictlan. The seed has to be buried in the dark and it has to break open in order to sprout.
Right.
Mictlantecuhtli's realm teaches that death, whether literal or symbolic like sitting in the chamber of reflection, provides the raw material for new life. You have to willingly descend and face that broken skeleton self to rise again as a true builder.
So if brokenness and bones are the seeds of creation, how does the initiate actually go about planting them? Like, how do you cultivate a shattered ego?
Well, the text argues this happens through two primary mechanisms: the active practice of silence and the continuous act of building.
Okay, let's talk about silence first.
We have to look at the physical atmosphere of Mictlan to understand its role. In Aztec cosmology, the celestial realms, the heavens, are filled with vibrant colors, constant movement, and the continuous music of the gods.
A lot of sensory input.
Right. Mictlan is the exact opposite. It is completely pitch dark and profoundly aggressively silent.
But the text specifically notes that this stillness isn't the same thing as lifelessness, right? It's not just an empty void.
Oh no, it is pure potential.
Uh-huh.
It is a latent force waiting to be awakened. In Freemasonry, silence is not just the absence of noise, it is a highly functional tool.
How so?
The initiate must learn when to speak, but far more importantly, they must learn how to listen. The symbolic chamber of death isn't a place for chatter or defending your past actions.
You can't argue your way out of it.
Exactly. Silence is the only mechanism that allows the candidate to finally hear the whisper of their own conscience over the roaring demands of their ego.
Which brings up the most striking physical symbols of that silence. Skulls.
Ah, yes, the skulls.
The Aztecs had the Zompantli, which were massive, towering wooden racks displaying thousands of human skulls.
Which is quite an image.
Right. From a modern perspective, walking past a wall of skulls looks like an instrument of pure terror.
Yeah.
It looks like a gruesome warning to your enemies to stay away.
Sure, it looks like intimidation. But the text recontextualizes the Zompantli completely. For the Aztecs, these racks served as a site of deep ancestral reverence and cosmic accountability.
Accountability, that's an interesting word for it.
Yeah, the dead were kept present in the sacred space, not to haunt the living, but to bear silent witness.
Oh, I see.
Their presence was a constant, undeniable reminder to the living of their cosmic duties and the fleeting impermanence of their earthly actions.
And we see that exact same psychological utility in early Freemasonry.
We do.
Like, historical lodges would often place a physical human skull on the altar or on the tracing board.
Actually, I should clarify what a tracing board is for those unfamiliar.
Oh, yeah, please do.
In the days before dedicated Masonic buildings, lodges would meet in taverns. They would literally draw their symbols on the floor with chalk or charcoal to teach the candidate, and then wash it away afterward.
That's fascinating.
Right. Eventually, these evolved into permanent painted floor cloths or tracing boards that visually map out the philosophical lessons of the degree.
So placing a skull on this teaching board wasn't just to make the room look spooky.
Not at all.
It was an active tool. It was there as a constant, silent reminder of the brevity of life and the absolute urgency of doing moral labor right now while you still have breath.
It forces the ultimate question: what are you doing with the limited time you have left?
Right.
This entire philosophy culminates in the third degree of Freemasonry, the Master Mason degree.
The highest degree.
Yes. The candidate undergoes a visceral rite of symbolic death and resurrection. They are struck down, they are buried in symbolic darkness, which represents the purification of Mictlan, and finally, they are raised to light by what the ritual calls the grip of the lion's paw.
And the text makes a really fascinating esoteric connection here. It describes Mictlantecuhtli as the Tyler of the Underworld during this process.
Which is a brilliant parallel.
Just for anyone who isn't a Mason, the Tyler is the officer who sits outside the closed door of the lodge with a drawn sword. Their literal job is to keep out what they call cowens.
Right. And cowan being an old Scottish operative masonry term for an unskilled bricklayer. But esoterically, it's used to mean an outsider, an intruder, or an uninvited eavesdropper.
So Mictlantecuhtli is essentially the cosmic bouncer.
Basically, yes.
He is that silent brother standing guard in the cryptic chamber, keeping the noise of the outside world at bay, overseeing the burial, and watching the seed get planted.
He watches the burial, but he doesn't judge the candidate.
Yeah.
He simply allows the necessary process of purification in the dark to unfold without interference.
Which brings us to the ultimate so what for you, the listener. Like, how does a terrifying Aztec god and a secret Masonic ritual apply to your daily commute?
Right. How do we use this?
The text argues that the Temple of Solomon represents the self, and it must be built from soundstones. The skull represents the death of the ego, and that ego death becomes the foundational cornerstone for your inner temple.
Yes.
If silence is the quarry where we harvest these stones, we have to ask what our modern habits are doing to our spiritual architecture.
It is a profound question because we live in an era of unprecedented noise.
Absolutely nonstop.
If you never allow yourself to sit in the chamber of reflection, if you constantly avoid voluntarily entering the silence of your own personal Mictlan, you never have to confront your skeleton self.
You never do the work.
Exactly. You never have to do the quiet, agonizing work of chipping away the rough edges of your ego. Without that silence, you are trying to build your inner temple out of mud and digital noise rather than solid, tested stone.
We are terrified of our own skeleton selves.
We really are.
Think about it. If you're standing in an elevator for 10 seconds, you instinctively pull out your phone.
Oh, every time.
You cannot stand at a red light for 30 seconds without checking a notification. We are actively running away from the chamber of reflection every single day because facing that silent guardian of the crypt is deeply uncomfortable.
And in doing so, you are denying yourself the foundational material to build anything lasting. Mictlantecuhtli's terrifying silence is actually an act of immense mercy. It's a forced pause in the frantic, exhausting motion of modern life that permits genuine reflection.
So true growth isn't just about endless, positive, upward climbing.
No, we're conditioned to think progress is always ascending. But the alchemy of brokenness teaches us that sometimes you have to willingly descend. You have to walk into your own personal underworld, face the stillness, and let your ego shatter.
Because it's only when you drop the box and shatter the pieces that you can sweep them up and build something exponentially stronger.
The grave isn't the end. It is the foundation of the temple.
That's a powerful thought.
It is. And the text actually leaves us with a preview of its next chapter, introducing a final lingering thought.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we've talked extensively today about the earth, the shattered bones, and the planting of the seed. Mictlantecuhtli represents that necessary dark earth.
Right.
But the next step in the Aztec cosmological journey involves a deity named Chalchulicu.
Chalchulicu.
Yes. She is the goddess of jade-colored waters, of lakes, rivers, and rebirth. She represents the water that cleanses the soul after the grueling descent, allowing the journey to finally begin anew.
Okay.
So if you've done the hard work, if you've allowed your ego to shatter and you've planted those bone seeds in the quiet, silent dark of your own reflection, what is the water in your life that you need to finally make them sprout?
Wow. Something to think about the next time you find yourself sitting in the dark. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep seeking the light in the dark.